Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I am Tony Guerra. I had students asking me for phone support with their application process, and last year I tried doing kind of a mock interview thing, and that didn't really work the way I wanted to. That wasn't what they really needed. What they needed was how to answer certain questions specifically, how to figure out which places to apply to, how to figure out which APPEs. So made it easy to just, if you prefer email, that's fine, $95 for the course with 6 months of email support, and then $295 if you want 2 hours of phone support. But let me go through kind of one of the rationales that I went through with someone I'm helping out. And this has a lot to do with APPEs and making sure you're applying to places that you properly match to. So we're going to put 3 students, one student, and I just gave them 7 rotations. Most of you are going to take, you can take the minimum, I think, for the 6-weekers is 6 rotations with 1 elective. The 5-weekers will probably do 8, and then the 4-weekers may do a little bit more than that, maybe 9 or even 10. But let's talk a little bit about how you match and what you're looking for. So what I did was I put some of the elite residency sites, or at least pharmacy residency sites: Mayo Rochester, Maryland, UMS, which is University of Maryland Medical Center, UChicago Medicine, Yale New Haven, Cedars-Sinai, North Carolina, NYU Langone, Kentucky, Memorial Hermann in Texas, and Vanderbilt. So, really across the country. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go through this as we kind of look at each student and see, okay, well, how well do they match? And so let's take student 1. We'll kind of clear the rest of these out. I'm doing a video, so if you want to kind of follow along in color, you can. And what we see is the students taking admin, cardiology, critical care, drug info, emergency med, ID, internal med, a very clinical set of APPEs. And what we can do is, as we kind of look at these, we can say, all right, well, how well do you match? And something like Mayo Rochester, to some extent, they're a little bit prescriptive in what they want: cardiology, critical care, emergency, ID, and internal med. And then I think some of these were longitudinal, but medication use, research, surgery, and teaching, not the surgery, but those were, the ones that they were really, really looking for. But this kind of core of cardiology, critical care, emergency, ID, and internal med, this is somebody thinking about adult medicine and really kind of putting themselves in a good stead for most sites. But what you can do is you can match a little better than other people. And what I mean by that is critical care and internal med are 2 of your requirements, and so is AmCare. So you're not really gaining an advantage there. However, this student is gaining an advantage with emergency, with ID, and with cardiology. And when we look at both of these, Mayo Rochester and Maryland UMS tend to be very widespread in their residents. The Maryland, I think, only had 2 that are local to their actual, Maryland, the school. I don't think I saw anyone from UMES or even Notre Dame in there. So if you're from out of state, not really a problem to apply to Maryland, though it is competitive, as is Mayo, obviously. But really, these, kind of 7 matched up really well here. But then we look at Chicago Medicine and Yale New Haven, and we've got AmCare, cardiology, critical care, internal med, again, that requirement. But now we're going to add pediatrics, and something a place like UMS is really adult medicine, where here in these we're seeing quite a bit that we could maybe add pediatrics. And then this transitions of care is something that you could get hospital experience at as work experience. So you could do it as an APPE, but maybe an advantage to actually get work experience there. But you can see how well this second student matches up to these 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Say, oh, wow, they should, these are 2 good choices. But Chicago Medicine and Yale New Haven both very competitive. And the thing with Chicago is that if you're not from the Chicagoland area, then you're probably not going to be a PGY1 there. They're very, very regional in their pull. And then Yale New Haven, I couldn't find their residence on their website. Maybe I just missed it. But again, we would expect Yale to, they have one of those longitudinal rotations within Yale, and that might be an option if you're kind of looking ahead to something like that. But really what we're seeing is that you have to kind of maybe think, okay, let's put emergency med and ID to the side, and let's start thinking more pediatrics practice and transitions of care. And you can see how, while this first student, very well qualified with significant clinical rotations, isn't necessarily a great match here for Chicago and Yale New Haven, because this emergency and ID, maybe the emergency med for Chicago, but it's not really a big focus here. Okay. Now with New Haven, we could put that the stewardship is, antimicrobial stewardship versus ID. You can kind of split hairs there, but you can see that student 2 is really a better match here. Cedars-Sinai, one of the most prescriptive residencies in the entire country in terms of these are the ones that you take, and NYU Langone is as well in terms of okay, well, these are your rotations. We're going to make you a very general. We're going to put you through all of these very, very disparate rotations. And you're going to be a very well-rounded person. And we see all the time in the applications, I want to be a well-rounded person. Well, maybe, but if you're applying for PGY2, you don't want to be well-rounded. You want it to be well-rounded to some extent, but you really want to be specific. But we can see that someone can match just as easily to, I don't want to say match easily, but what we can do is we can see that this person is going to be a good candidate for both UNC and Cedars-Sinai. Kind of matching 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of their rotations. But look how just very, very different Cedars-Sinai is, because now you're talking about, well, this first person has cardiology, but all of the other ones kind of match in there as well. So student 1 would be pretty good for Sinai, and student 3 would be, but I'm not sure if this student 2 who didn't take onc and peds would really be as well. So what you're going to find as you're kind of working through this is you really want to find 1 or 2 of these kind of, maybe I would say 3 of these reach schools, because the chances are that you're going to match to your first, second, or third choice. And the mistake students make is they think that, okay, well, I'm applying to 12 places, that increases my chances exponentially. Well, it kind of doesn't. What you're really doing with those 12 is trying to find where your top 3 are going to be. And one of the best ways to match is to have APPEs that match what their requirements are. And you can see that NYU Langone, it really has this kind of very prescriptive view of what we're going to do. So these are the ones that you're required to do. You've got ID, stewardship, intensive care, emergency. 2 internal meds is unusual, oncology and peds. And you could say, okay, well, maybe this third student would actually kind of match pretty well to it. We'll just use the orange here. But you can see that emergency and ID are not on their resume. And it would be unusual to have pediatrics and oncology. That's kind of a little bit of a very elective-y pairing that you would see. And so you'd say, okay, well, if I'm going to go to NYU, I really want to maybe even take 1 or 2 more clinicals. Whereas with Kentucky, they're okay with the admin, the AmCare, and they really want to see that surgery. And then let's go these kind of last 2, Memorial Hermann in Texas. Again, we're kind of using that third student again, and we can see that, man, they just, it's really not looking so good in terms of matching. They've got critical care internal med, but everybody has that. And they required AmCare Doesn't look like that third student's a very good match here for Memorial Hermann. And someone like student 1 would be a much better match with their emergency and ID. And then Vanderbilt's kind of this very special elite because they have, these are your requirement, 2 of your requirements for, having to do the APPEs, the critical care, internal med, the AmCare. But they just say, all right, well, critical care, internal med, and nutrition. That's what we require. And then the rest is electives. And it's kind of the polar opposite of a Cedars-Sinai or an NYU, a little bit less so Chicago. There's a lot of choices within the ones that they have at Chicago. But you can see that it is tremendously open. And so at Vanderbilt, what they're really tend to be building is, okay, well, let us know what PGY2 you want, and then we're going to allow you to kind of do those electives. So when we're kind of talking one-on-one and we're, got this spreadsheet in front of us, what we really want to do is kind of pick one of those. If you're going to be applying to the elites like this, you really want to pick kind of those places that you're matching, I would say 5 or even 6 of your APPEs. And when they have these hundreds of applications, what you're really doing is trying to get a job that matches what you've done. And the mistake I see all the time is, well, I'm interested in critical care, and so I just have to have that one. But what they don't want is someone that is fully unprepared to meet the rigors. So someone like Cedars-Sinai, you have to have 5 or 6 clinicals. I wouldn't even think of applying to Cedars-Sinai without that many. Penn Medicine that I don't have on there is one that has a lot of those too. And so you're really trying to figure out, like, okay, where do I fit when it comes to these? And then once you kind of figure that out, then you kind of look at the other aspects of it and see, where are their residents from. Memorial Hermann, I think if you go to one of their hospitals, 2 of them were from Texas and 1 of them was from Incarnate Word, which is in San Antonio. And then, you look at some place like Chicago, those are going to mostly be from the Chicago area. But you can contrast that with someone like Maryland that takes them from, up and down that eastern seaboard and even a little bit inland. So many different things to consider. But what I would really, really do, if you've kind of got this first, kind of figured out, all right, this is my APPE schedule, where do I match? You really want to start kind of making your sheet, put up the ones that you think you match to, and then, we could talk about, back and forth. So if you want the email version, we can talk back and forth about your spreadsheet and say, okay, well, this is what I think. And then if you want to talk on the phone, that's obviously a little bit more intensive, something we can do as well. But, if you want me to email this sheet to you, I'd be happy to. But when you're looking at, applying to somewhere, what they really want to see, and this may sound strange, especially for someplace like Cedars-Sinai or someplace like NYU where they have so many prescriptive ones, is someone who says, I want my focus to be in blank, but I want to have a very broad preparation. And what that's saying to them is, okay, you're one of us. You know what we're about here. Whereas at Vanderbilt, I would say I love that there is so much flexibility there. And with Chicago Medicine, to some extent, there is a lot of flexibility there because you look at each of these, you're like, okay, well, when you're looking at critical care, that can mean a lot of different things, a lot of different ICUs. When you're looking at pediatrics, well, that's not just pediatrics. There's many different choices. And it's probably Chicago Medicine is probably one of my favorite, setups for the website. And then some of them I didn't include on here because their websites are so difficult to read. They don't really spell out, these are the core rotations, these are the electives, and this is what our focus is at this hospital. And there's this kind of last mistake I'll talk about. And I know I talk a lot about mistakes. I'm not really glass half empty. It's just that this is what tends to happen. The reason these are their core requirements is because this is what the hospital needs. And so if you are someone who has these, the hospital needs you. If you don't have them, then the hospital would struggle to be with you, and you might cause more trouble than you're worth. So again, very first step to matching, get the spreadsheet together, put your APPEs, which student are you over here, start building, okay, here are some of the ones that I'm thinking about applying to, and really learn what it is to match. And then within the course, I talk about the point system and all of that stuff. So again, residency.teachable.com if you want to work with me. Let me know, but the season is upon us, and we are in September, October, November, December coming right up. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about this. But if you want the spreadsheet, just give me an email, tonythepharmacist@gmail.com.